This is Robert Kraft, and I'm your host on SNN Network. And joining me right now is Nick Blitterswyk. He is the CEO of UGE International. It's a publicly traded company. I got two symbols for you: UGE on the TSX Venture and UGEIF on the OTCQB. Nick, great to see you, and thank you for joining us at the Planet MicroCap Showcase Virtual.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Bobby.
It's great to have you here. And first things first, I have to ask, how's the family? Everyone's good?
Yeah, no, thankfully everyone on the family and for the company as well. Everyone's been, knock on wood, everyone's been healthy and surviving this pandemic.
That's great to hear. All right, so last time we actually did a CEO video interview was in April 2017. Now, in lieu of getting every single update since then, I figured this would be a good opportunity to start off with an overview and history of UGE up until today. So, Nick, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sounds good. So we're about a 10-year-old renewable energy company. So just to frame it, right now, what we've grown to is that we're a commercial and community solar developer of these types of projects. So we develop these projects, we build these projects, we finance and operate and own these projects going forward as well. So that's the UGE of 2020. Like I said, the company's been around for about 10 years. The industry has changed so much in that time frame, and of course, we've changed with it. We've known each other for I think about 4 years now, and so great to see you again here. And I think when we first met, we were in the process of bringing together that platform that allows us to develop, build, finance, own, and operate these projects and be that real turnkey provider. When we met, we had just made an acquisition of a company that was engineering and building these projects and had the expertise that includes. Before that, UGE was really just focused on the first part of it. We had a lot of experience, identifying, developing, selling projects, that earlier part. And so, our grand plan here was to bring together those three pieces so that for the clients we work with, we can do all three pieces very efficiently, very quickly, and capture the most margins that we can to UGE. And so, we had made that acquisition in 2016. And we made actually a second one in 2017, which really helped build out the expertise, but it brought with it a bunch of revenue from what we call like EPC, the services in the middle piece, working to other developers. And kind of to make a long story short, we had tried to make that a revenue arm for the business, and especially in 2018 when there was a political change in Ontario, where a lot of that revenue was, we decided to wind down that area of the business and just focus on the kind of like the bread and butter of develop, build, finance these projects. So, that was a bit painful to go through. That was like the second half of 2018, first half of 2019, but we've really emerged over the last six to 9 months with that renewed focus on these types of projects that we do and seen our backlog grow quite significantly in the process. So we're excited about now having that platform in place and being able to take that and the company to the next level.
Got it. So, what would you say then, makes the company different and unique compared to some of your peers in the solar energy industry?
Yeah, well, first, of course, the solar energy industry itself is very large. Even within the main components of that, residential, kind of broadly speaking, mid-scale and utility scale, those three different industries themselves are very different, and each area has its own pluses and minuses. The commercial solar space, though, is roughly speaking the same size as the resi space, which of course is quite large. The resi space has some pretty large companies that a lot of your viewers would know about, the Sunruns of the world and Vivint and in the past Solar City and so on. So the commercial solar space really doesn't have that type of player yet. And of course, we aim to be that type of company within the commercial and community solar space. So number one, and number two is the mid-scale space is just a lot more underdeveloped. It's a lot more fragmented. There's a lot of opportunity in this space. There's been a lot of like regulatory changes, loosening up and what have you, that have allowed our space to really flourish. And maybe I'll come back to it, but the community solar space is one that we're really excited about. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've been growing really fast in that, and that's we think going to take this industry to a much higher level in the future years. But then also just within the mid-scale space, what makes us different is really this turnkey aspect of what we do. Our industry is filled with companies that just do one component of that, and what we've experienced time and time again is that the handoff between these different areas is really troublesome for the clients and for other players in the industry. It really slows things down, adds a lot of friction, and frankly, the companies that are developing those projects are losing a lot of value by selling off those projects as they go. So, our real value proposition here to our investors is, by us developing, building, and then financing to hold these projects, we're able to capture a lot more value. And our value prop to our clientele, the real estate owners and so on that we work with, is that, hey, for all of your buildings, you can just work with UGE and we'll be that one neck to strangle throughout the entire time here. And I think they really appreciate that as well.
Gotcha. So let's say when one of your customers signs up with UGE for a solar project, what does the scope of a typical project look like? And part two of this question is, are they one-time project development fees to UGE, or is there a recurring revenue component to it?
Yeah, so I think that the commercial solar space, I think that a lot of people outside of the industry might think about it as like a company decides they want solar, they call us up and we install solar for them. In reality, that virtually never happens. And actually, the industry is much different than that. So, our biggest skill set that we have is developing new projects. It's identifying markets and specific locations that'll be very good opportunities for us to develop projects because those projects will hold value, right? So in our markets, what we'll do is we'll identify those, in many cases, buildings, maybe a parking lot, maybe a plot of land that'll make for a very good mid-scale solar project. We will approach the owner of that property and typically lease that, say, rooftop from them. So if you're an owner of a distribution center near New York City, first call us. But second, for that type of customer, what we'll do for you is we'll say, okay, we'll pay you $100,000 per year for 25 years for us to rent your rooftop. We're going to put a solar system on your rooftop. We'll need to go up there once or twice a year. You won't even know that we're there. And we'll pay you $100,000 rent for that rooftop for doing that. Now, meanwhile, what we'll do on our side is, we're experts at figuring out where we can sell the energy from that system for the most. So typically some aspect of sort of like, people would say into the grid, but really it's a community solar subscription networks that we work with. So like people living in apartment buildings or condo buildings or whatever can actually purchase that energy. They'll save money on their energy bill. The building will get paid for their rooftop. So we're, bringing all these together, and we're doing so on, of course, many different projects. I think, in our backlog at any given point in time, we probably have about 25 to 50 of these types of projects that we're working through.
Got it. So, I mean, you must get approached by some of these apartment complexes or also as well as say, hey, Nick, can you guys develop a project right here? I mean, you must get those calls inbound as well. Say, hey, you guys, can you do a project right here and save energy for all of us in this building? I mean, do you get those calls as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say that probably our most common deal source is from referrals. Like virtually every one of our customers is a repeat customer that we work with time and time again. And you would ask the question too, by the way, in terms of like, is this a one-time or is this a recurring revenue aspect, right? So, for one of these real estate owners, as we're bringing those projects together, and also kind of linking to your question about the history of UGE and our evolution, so earlier on, we would develop those projects and we would sell them to other funds or what have you. As we've grown, and really in the very recent history of our company, like the last couple quarters, we've gotten to a point where we're self-financing these projects, and that's going to generate a very quickly increasing amount of recurring revenue for us as well. So, I would estimate that right now in our backlog, maybe 75% to 80% of the projects are the type that will be recurring revenue going forward.
Got it. Yeah, because it's different. I mean, I remember the solar industry, not even 3-4 years ago, because I've interviewed a few solar companies in the microcap space, and I remember the main model was that they were just selling. You were really just selling panels at that point, and putting panels on certain projects. It wasn't like this where you were identifying projects, say, hey, we'll pay you for that space so that all these people can get the benefit, as can we. Because once you install it, it's I guess it would be recurring until they decide, I guess, to take the panels off, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And typically they're 25-year contracts. So usually, they're quite long term. And so, we look forward to our balance sheet and income statement showing that more and more quarter over quarter into the future years here. And I'll say too that the reason for that change all comes down to the economics of solar. The
Right.
economics have changed so significantly. You go back 3 or 4 years, the price per panel or per watt, as we usually measure them in this industry, may have been $1 per watt or close to that range. Go back 10, 12 years, you were over $3, up to $4 per watt. Right now, depending on what market we're in, it's 20 to 35 cents per watt. And the reason for that discrepancy mostly comes down actually to the tariffs that we pay on importing panels in the U.S. So it's actually, in some ways, the industry used to benefit from incentives and so on, but actually it would be that much more cost effective if we didn't have those types of things.
I was gonna say it seems kind of counterintuitive where you would think, we want to incentivize more companies like a UGE out there to really install solar and renewable energy resources around, not just our country but globally, and yet, you got to look at the economics of it, and you just have to be creative.
Yeah, for us, it all comes down to being creative, looking at the economics, and identifying opportunities where for kind of like sustainable markets that we can be, we typically say like top two in each market that we're in, and be in those markets for multiple years, generating a lot of revenue and building a lot of projects over that time frame. So we try to, the industry, we often joke calling it the solar coaster because there's been so much changes and so on, which I think, at the end of the day, it's an industry that's grown so quickly. I think that since 2010, the commercial mid-scale space has grown about 8x. So the industry has grown exponentially, and yet we're still at, we estimate, about 1% market penetration, so still very low. But we just try to focus on what we can do, and obviously this industry is growing very quickly, and we have very high hopes for where it'll go going forward.
For sure. So my next question is something that I've been asking every CEO that I've had on the program, since we are now officially in a global pandemic. So I just have to ask, how has the company been affected by COVID, the pandemic, and everything going on right now globally?
Yeah, no, it's well, a couple of things. We actually had got a little bit of a window into this early on. So again, roughly speaking, somewhere around 75% of our backlog right now is in the US. We do have an Asian business as well, actually. So we're quite active in the Philippines and one of the market leaders in that market. And when the COVID crisis first hit China, we had a couple of shipments that were about to go out, and just at the time where all the factories locked down, and that caused us about I think depending on what component, anywhere from like a 2 to 4 week delay at that point in time. So some stuff that we were expecting to arrive in February ended up coming in March. So that type of time frame. So in the big picture, something that we could live with, and we actually saw China get back to work fairly quickly. And so from that perspective, I think we had some level of optimism. In the U.S. and Philippines markets now, though, we've had obviously all the stay-at-home orders and restrictions on economic activity. So, as we speak, that's what we've been mostly dealing with for the last month or so, is a slowdown in what we can do in terms of actually building projects. Now, in big picture, earlier I talked about develop the projects, build the projects, and there's like the financing, operating of the projects, right? It's really just that middle third that slowed down. And in fact, like the first third in terms of developing new projects, we've actually seen an increase in demand for obvious reasons. Businesses or real estate owners looking for additional sources of revenue, given everything that's been going on in the world. So, that area has been going really well. I think we've had a renewed focus actually on getting projects through the development steps so we can be ready to build them. Definitely like the building of them has been slowed down in the short term. So sometime in mid-March, let's say, into probably mid-May or something like that. What we're seeing in the markets that we're in is pretty strong signals that the construction aspects of the economy will be opened up before other parts. So we're hopeful that we can get building projects and moving things forward, certainly within Q2 here. And in the meantime, just making sure that we load the spring and be able to, exit this pandemic with that much more work to do and continue the growth trajectory that we're once again on here.
So Nick, one quick question that I wanted to ask you regarding, and you answered this a few times during this interview, is regarding the backlog. For an investor audience, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so on I think most recent time we announced our backlog, we announced April 8th that it had exceeded 45 million USD. So what does that mean? And so across our business, what will happen is, like, let's say that we find a business that says, we found them, we said this is a really good rooftop for us to develop a solar project on. We go and we pitch the client. We'll rent that from you for X dollars per year for 25 years. We negotiate a little bit, and they say yes, okay. So we sign with them what's called a binding letter of intent. So it gives us rights to develop that project. And what we're going to do is we're going to do our initial design work, right? Our engineering team's going to do a bunch of work. We'll have to do some site visits to confirm the structural integrity of the building. We'll need to do some grid work to confirm the interconnection requirements at that site. And we'll need to update our financial model as we go to get to a point where the project is at NTP, notice to proceed. And so our binding LOI gives us the rights to do all of that. And as long as we come out the other side ready to build the project, then we sign the option and then it's contracted. So that 45 plus million dollars is projects that are within those various stages. And like the grid and so on can take a little bit of time to get back to you, like working with the utility and so on. So that development stage can take, let's say, 2 to 6 months. Like it can take a while. And that's really, I think, one of our key advantages, understanding these local markets, who to work with and what the value we can get out of that project will be. So that 45 plus million backlog is all projects that are in those stages. We have rights to develop those projects. But then in terms of what that value is, that is our calculation of the net present value of those projects. So we in our investor presentation, we go through an example for a project in New York of like a $1 million net present value project that generates about 2.5 million of revenue over its project lifetime. You can go in and see more detail there. It is a bit complicated, so we try to go into more detail in that, for example, in our MD&A and so on as well.
So from what you can tell us, what would you say are the 1 to 2 things investors should look for from the company moving forward?
Yeah, so through 2019, the real focus was on finishing up this past, we call like EPC, the service revenue that was building projects for other companies, the business unit that we had to wind down. And so we got that out of our system. That showed up through the income statements. There's a few things to tie up, but for the most part, what we've been showing to investors is, hey, look at all the new projects coming online that are self-developed, as we call, like the projects we're developing ourselves, building and financing them. The margins on that are much higher. So, our margins for 2019 were up well over 2x the year before. So we've seen our margins increasing. And now just tracking that backlog, the growth of it, the maturation of it, and then also as it hits the income statement. I think we have such a big backlog here. Right now it's about 9 times last year's revenue and about 10 times our market cap. So, as people get a handle on how big that backlog is, how much it's growing, how real it is, and how it is maturing and coming down to the income statement, I think there's going to be a lot of reasons to take another look at UGE.
Well, with that, where can my audience go and find more information about UGE and everything they need to know?
So UGEI.com is our website. Of course, we have an investor section on there. Definitely encourage people to subscribe to our newsletter. We'll make sure that we contextualize our various contract announcements, financials, and things like that with a brief newsletter there. And through that as well, you can always reach out to us for any questions or whatever as well.
Nick, thank you so much for joining me today and also participating in the conference. Good luck, stay safe, and I look forward to our next update.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Bobby.